My name is Pete Chilton, and I played bass in the band Bane and the band Barrit.
I'm Pete Cortez. I was in Overcast.
My name's Brian Fair. I was a vocalist for Overcast and Shadows Fall, and currently actually singing for a band called Hell Night.
So I'm Chris Berthium. I was in Holdstrong, and I was the singer for the band.
I'm Pat Aldrich. I played for the band 40daysrain. I played guitar.
I'm Bill Cole. I was in a band called Holdstrong and I played guitar.
So my name's Kevin Marr. I was in the band Daysgone and I was the vocalist.
My name's Andy Kite. In the year of our Lord, I played bass and did some backing vocals.
My name is Rashid Hale and I was the singer for Close Call.
My name is Luke Garrow. I played drums in Fastbreak and I played drums in My Eyes.
My name is John Cimino, aka John Grimlock, aka John Locke. I was in the band Grimlock from Boston, Massachusetts. First, let me tell you this. My real name is Giovanni Bernardo Sanchez Cimino. Nobody wants to talk that way. I couldn't even remember that. So then eventually it became Johnny Cimino. Then it became John Cimino. And then John Locke, John Grimlock. And now we got the Mego Stretch Hulk, which is my pen name because I write for all these great and big comic magazines, but it actually means it's my two favorite toys combined into one. The Mego Elastic Hulk from 1979, that was the greatest toy ever made, but then there was an offshoot in Europe called the Dennis Fisher Stretch Hulk, and that came out at the same time. Blew my mind. Wanted it my entire life when I was a kid, so what could I do better than putting the Mego Stretch Hulk in one word, you know? You got the Elastic Hulk there and you got the Stretch Hulk, all combined. Mego Stretch Hulk, don't forget it. Howsa!
Now they become aggressors, yet they don't know what they say. It all starts here. The answer is clear. Lines get drawn and circles form. All possible connections will soon be torn. Communication lacking will soon divide us all. When tolerance is gone, it will cast the final fall.
Well, of course, like I was a metalhead before I even knew what hardcore was. So, you know, like the usual suspects like Metallica, Megadeth, Slayer. But then Mike D actually turned me on. He used to make me like mixtapes with like Starkweather and like Shelter, Leeway, that kind of stuff, Cro-Mags, and he just kind of got me hooked on it, and you know, I was a nerd from there on.
I grew up with sort of a hard rock metal background before I got into hardcore, so Faith No More was definitely part of that. And as far as hardcore goes, like Inside Out and Burn and Groundwork and Unbroken sort of were the bands that sort of got me into hardcore, along with Overcast and Converge as far as like local bands.
Musical influences, I guess, going way back, the first bands that I kind of got into were like classic metal, like old Ozzy and you know, Kiss and early Motley Crue, but then got into thrash metal pretty early on. And probably Metallica, Anthrax, and Testament were the three big ones out of that style. And then through skateboarding and stuff, I got into like Bad Brains and the Circle Jerks were two real early influences that were more on the punk rock hardcore side of things. And from there, it was bands like Cro-Mags, Leeway, you know, early Biohazard. And locally, though, there was a lot of killer bands doing like just different styles. Like Only of a Witness was bringing the kind of more rock riff vibe to things. Sam Black Church was just, you know, super manic and crazy. And then some of the bands that Overcast came up with, like Kingpin and Arise and Endless, were local bands that were really like kind of pushing music into different directions. So we were real lucky to have like kids our own age that were actually actively influencing us. It was a really experimental and just kind of out there scene in the suburban hardcore Massachusetts days of the early 90s.
Growing up, especially in high school, started to get into a lot of like the thrash metal bands. So obviously like Metallica and you know, bands like Exodus and Testament, and then Death Angel. After like high school and into college, started getting into more kind of progressive metal bands. So like Fate's Warning kind of stuff, but stuff that was certainly like, you know, faster and certainly loud.
So Overcast, Converge, Kingpin, Lifetime, Gorilla Biscuits.
Starting out Holdstrong, we wanted that heavier sound, and myself and Matt Myrtle, who started the band, were into death metal, so it was like Obituary, Carcass, Entombed, some of those heavier influences, and then we kind of mixed in, well, we like the punk rock attitude and the speed of it, so probably Sick of It All.
Yeah, so growing up, my parents listened to a lot of folk music, Irish folk, but American folk music, so we listened to a lot of that growing up. But then growing up in the 80s, definitely a lot of pop music. Listened to, when MTV started, listened to pretty much anything pop, and then got into metal in my early teen years, and that sort of led me down the spiral into punk rock and hardcore.
I would say there's a variety of metal and other hardcore band influences. For metal, bands like Metallica, At the Gates, Iron Maiden. For hardcore, other bands in the New England metal hardcore scene, Converge, Overcast, Ire from Canada. There's quite a few.
Musical influences came from a lot of different sources, but primarily what it was for me was your usual suspects for you know, fast hardcore, and also any band that carried that skateboarding mentality, because those two really went hand in hand for me for a long time. Any band that had a member that looked like me, that had a huge plus. I was drawn to those bands because I guess I was always looking for some type of representation in everything that I did.
I got into playing drums when I was a freshman in high school, and I immediately gravitated towards people that were playing heavy and that specifically were playing a genre of music that I like to play. So I always like listening to Alan Cage, great drummer, Sammy too. You know, I think it was really about the music I was listening to and those drummers who were playing the style that I wanted to sound exactly like. I was never like a classic drummer. I didn't listen to Neil Peart and love that kind of stuff. You know, I kind of stayed in the lane that I wanted to be in and really kind of looked up to those drummers to try to emulate that style, bring it to the music that we're playing.
Musically, I was inspired by Jim Morrison and the Doors, a little bit of Phil Anselmo, and believe it or not, a little bit of Marky Mark.
So Baines started between Aaron Dahlbeck, who was the guitar player for Converge, and Aaron Bedard, who had been in a band a while back called Backbone, and which Aaron Dahlbeck knew about. So they sort of got together. Aaron Dahlbeck was trying to start something a little bit different than Converge, a little more hardcore based rather than sort of metal based, and someone connected those two, and they decided that they were going to start a band, and then they started looking for other players. And I happened to run into Aaron at Newbury Comics in Shrewsbury, and I mentioned to him that I was a bass player, and we sort of started talking, and he's like, well, why don't you come and try out for this new band I'm starting? And you know, to me that was like the craziest thing ever, because Aaron from Converge, who I was a huge fan of, was asking me to try out for one of his a new band of his. So Barrit started in Worcester. There was a band called Realm, R-E-L-M. They sort of started playing in the Worcester scene as like a smaller local band, a heavy band that played shows with Converge and other local heavy bands. And in high school, I was always sort of envious of that band because they seemed to get some cool shows, and the songs were really interesting and complex. And then Realm broke up. A couple players moved away and went to college and things like that. And Zach and Nate and Lou, their bass player, started the new band. And they played for a little bit here and there, and then Lou sort of decided to move, so he took off, and Zach, I knew Zach from being in the scene together, and he asked me to play bass for Barrit. So it was sort of an established band when I joined as a bass player, and kind of grew from there.
Overcast formed, man, it was either 1990 or early 91. Me and Mike D, bass player, we met skateboarding at a friend's ramp. It was super random. Started talking about music, and we went and saw Leeway, Only Live a Witness, Said and Done, I think, and Breakdown at the Channel in Boston. And on that ride, we started talking about starting a band. I played bass at the time, and he played bass, so that's how I ended up singing, basically. So, and because he had a bunch of riffs already. So, and then we found Jay on drums, jammed just as a three-piece until we found Pete on guitar, and then we were off from there. Added Scotty McCoo down the road. Sean Rounds played second guitar for a minute. So yeah, I guess late 90, early 91.
Holdstrong started, I want to say it was like spring or early summer of 1993.
In a small suburban town in Massachusetts called Holden, Central Mass.
A bunch of kids that Bill Cole and Matt Myrtle, who were really the two founding members of the band, were friends with, kind of started, and they had a different singer before I came on.
Yeah, so I remember being at a show in Worcester. I think Shift was playing, and I knew Rob Woods for years. Like, we grew up roughly the same area north of Boston, so the same group of friends would go to shows in Boston together. So I knew him for a long time, and we started talking at this show about how we wanted to play just a straight up hardcore band. This was in the mid-90s, and at that point there had been a slow progression to more indie rock style or metallic style of punk and hardcore, and we wanted to just play a straight up hardcore, fast hardcore band. So that idea sort of germinated, and Rob's, he takes initiative. So I said it, thought it was an exciting idea, but then before we knew it, we sort of put a band together, and then that was kind of the start of it. And we had our first practice at my parents' basement in Northborough, Mass, and we started playing regularly, got a practice space, and the band just kind of went off from there.
From what I understand, the Year of Our Lord was started by Nick and Scott Heigelman, two brothers from Maine. They started the band a year or two before I joined. I came on as a bass player in 1999, and I was a bass player till 2001.
So Fastbreak was a bunch of high school friends. Neil and I were friends with them. We were playing in a band called Tenfold at the time. They were a band, and their drummer, for various reasons, couldn't keep playing with them. I actually learned 2 Fastbreak songs on the way to a Fastbreak show when I found out that I believe Pat was going to be playing drums, or somebody was going to be playing drums, and I was like, well, I'll just learn these 2 songs, and showed up and told them that I learned them. They're like, all right, play them. So at the show where they weren't planning on having me play, I played, and they're like, that was great. Can you be in Fastbreak now? And pretty quickly, we were like, let's add another guitarist in. So we brought Neil in as well, because we were all great friends. So yeah, I ended up joining maybe about 2 years into the band's existence and played throughout, for the remainder of the band. But it really came down to like me listening to a song, a 7-inch at the time, and saying, I'm gonna learn these 2 songs, and learning them in about 10 minutes, and then getting on stage and playing them. Just gotta do it.
Describe how In My Eyes started.
Oh boy, let's see. So Anthony had just stopped being in 10 Yard Fight, and Neil and I had just come up to Boston for college. So he was going to BU, I was going to Northeastern, and we were still in Fastbreak at the time, but we're looking for ways to just keep playing music. And Pete and Anthony, who lived together at the time, were like, let's start a new band. And literally within a day, we were probably jamming in their basement. And Damien was just hanging out being sexy in Boston, a transplant from Philadelphia, who is a friend of the group as well. And the 5 of us just got together and started playing. And I think had written a demo within days based on songs that Anthony had, and probably had a cassette demo out, within weeks. So we kind of immediately went from not being a band to having music out there and playing shows immediately. It was pretty fun.
All right, Grimlock started through comic books, cartoons, and collectibles, and then a little bit of sprinkle of metal. That's where it actually started from. We started out of actually Amherst, Massachusetts, because my bass player, friend of mine, Matt Murdahl, was going there, and he was in a band, and we were trying to get into a band together, but when I finally moved out there with him, you know, Amherst, Mass, Northampton, Mass, it was a good scene of people were playing music, and it was a good place where I could start a band. So a lot of other musicians were coming out of there, so it was easy to acquire other people, and everybody was kind of in bands and all that stuff. So that's how we kind of formed, and I kind of made it known. I got taught to, like, you know, you put your name on a number saying, I said, hardcore singer, more crazier than anyone else, looking for band, and I would put them at the colleges and all that shit, and they would come and all around, and they would come and you know, you get a call. Some people would come, and I remember we got this one guitar player, this young kid. He comes, wanted to be in a band so bad, couldn't play a note. He tried to play a couple of E chords, and I remember saying to my roommate, he can't even fucking play. I was like, this is horrible. Like, I couldn't believe it, and I can't play either, but he couldn't play.
Bane signed with Equal Vision, just sort of like, hey, do you want to put out the Bane record? And they were like, yeah, we'll put out the Bane record. And we were like, okay, cool. And that was kind of the whole conversation. We later on in the career, we talked about going with other labels, you know, when it started to get a little bit busier and bigger and doing more tours and things like that. We talked about, you know, should we sign with Victory, or should we do Trustkill, or these other labels that were kind of hot and big at this time. Equal Vision just always came through for us. So we were friends with Steve Reddy, who owns the label. Dan Sanshaw, who's like the main AR guy there, was always great to us, and so it was like, we'll just stick with EVR, and they've always been terrific, and we've never had an issue with them. They've always supported Bane 100%, no matter what we wanted to do, even when we were difficult, which sometimes we were. Barrit never really pursued signing with any label. Our friend Mike Mannix, who ran Ellington Records, which is the 7-inch came out on and the CD came out on, he was just kind of a friend of ours, and he had this small record label, and he offered to put out the records, so we were just like, oh, that's fine. I think that Barrit never thought it would be bigger than, you know, just kind of a local, like, heavy band, even though we did do some tours, a small US tour and some of Canada and things like that. But I think that was never like you know, we're going to get this huge record label, record signing. I think the music was just too heavy and too weird and sort of out there, and there definitely wasn't any singing vocals on that. So we were just doing our thing, trying to, you know, put on a good show and do crazy stuff and do what we could do. That's it.
You know, we probably sent our, you know, the demos and the 7 inches out to a bunch of labels back then, but honestly, back then, everything was so small. Labels, even at the time, the biggest labels in hardcore were still pretty small. It was real DIY. So that's what's, you know, I'm sure if we would have stayed together, kind of when Overcast split up the initial time in like 98, was right when that stuff started kind of taking off a little bit more. So who knows what could have happened. You know, we had talked to Century Media, who ended up, you know, eventually signing Shadows Fall in the later days. So who knows if that would have been an option. But, you know, things kind of just went the way they were supposed to go. We put out 2 killer full lengths, a bunch of good 7 inches, and they now have gotten out to where they needed to be. You know, like back then, I think the first 7 inch there was maybe 100 pressed or whatever, you know. So it's cool now that in the digital age that all that music can finally get out there to everybody in a much easier way than having to track down, you know, some rare vinyl or CDs. We were lucky though with Edison Records back then. John Dudek, who unfortunately passed away, he started Edison Records, which put out like Overcast, Coalesce, Starkweather, a bunch of killer stuff, and he also owned Very Distribution, which, you know, did a lot of distro for hardcore and metal bands back then. So it was kind of, we were lucky that our label already had a distro built in, and John was just a hardworking dude who really helped kind of get Overcast out of just the New England area and kind of get, you know, spread the word a little bit. So we got lucky that way. But who knows, if we would have stuck around, yeah, we probably would have, you know, looked for a bigger label, but, you know, who knows.
Again, Matt Myrtle and I started Pin Drop, you know, because we sent out a demo tape to a bazillion labels and got no interest at all because it was terrible, to be honest, you know. And we said, well, what's the punk rock hardcore thing to do? It's that whole DIY thing. Let's start a label. Let's put it out ourselves. That went fairly well. So we said, well, let's look for another band. Let's put that out. Let's see what we can do with this label. So every release that we recorded, we would typically send it out to a whole bunch of labels, and we get a little interest here or there, nothing too serious. And then some of the labels that were similar size, in my opinion, to Pin Drop started to write back to me because they knew who I was, and they're like, well, what are you sending this to me for? Like, Pin Drop's way bigger than my label. Why would you want me to put this out? And it was just kind of like, I don't know, just wanted somebody else to find some interest in it, and maybe, you know, there was one particular label, I want to say it was in Syracuse, New York, that used to do full color, beautiful full color layout, 7-inch covers, and colored vinyl, and that was something I wasn't doing yet. So I was like, I really want this guy to put it out, just purely because his packaging was amazing.
Pin Drop kind of spun out of that effort or ability to try to get signed, and when it didn't happen, it was just a way for us to get our stuff out there, that name recognition beyond just the band, but also helping out other bands, you know, and making them a part of the Pin Drop label. Certainly helped us expand, but we were always interested in getting signed by somebody, you know, bigger. Obviously back in the day, the big name would have been like, you know, a Victory record type of thing.
We did a demo tape that we did on our own, and we went up to Londonderry and got it recorded at the same spot that Overcast recorded at. We thought that was pretty important. We released that on our own, got it out on our own, and then when we recorded our CD, we got picked up locally by a label called One Way Home Records, who put us out first, and then from there we released a 7-inch on Even the Score Records called The Price of Innocence. We released a split 7-inch with The Year of Our Lord, and then our CD got picked up by East Coast Empire, who re-released it, and and that now I believe it's on Blasphemer Records, who picked it up for the reunion.
So we were on Drawn and Quartered Records, and they put out our 7-inch, and we definitely were in conversation with a few labels, but you know, for us it really wasn't about that. It was really just about, like, playing shows was a ton of fun. We enjoyed that. We weren't, you know, we didn't enjoy the studio as much, and our first recording was frankly pretty sloppy, but for us it was just like that live experience. So it wasn't like a priority to get signed and all of that. It was really just like, let's play as many shows as we can. We knew it was a short window, a short life in terms of what the band was going to do. So we just like ran around as much as we could.
Yeah, the Year of Our Lord had some label interest from the larger metal labels in the year 2000. That didn't pan out, but that was very exciting times. I believe we talked to Metal Blade and Earache at that time.
We were on Espo Records for a while with our first EP, and then Gloom Records picked us up for our second 7-inch EP. Outside of that, I'm sure we tried, but we were very naive about going about it, and we were kind of hoping that bands would just show, or labels would just show interest, and they would come to us on some level. Nothing about a major label ever crossed our minds, I'm sure of that, but outside of like just the local, well, Gloom wasn't local, but that was a pretty big deal for us to get some music put out on that label.
When In My Eyes was ready to go beyond the 7-inch that we did, looking for labels, it really came down to Revelation. I mean, we've just loved every band that came out on that label, and I think something about the Rev Star felt really appropriate to us. And Victory Records, who at the time was bringing in more of those kind of youth hardcore revival bands. And ultimately, we chose Reb, honestly, because of the history, and we wanted to be associated with a lot of those early bands that were on there. We felt that, like, that's what was heavily influencing our sound and kind of the historical place we'd like to live. To be honest, I think Victory was even offering more at the time, but it just came down to us being like, we want our name and history to have the Rev Star on it, and that was the driving decision for it.
Describe the process of Fastbreak going from Big Wheel to Revelation Records. Were there other offers made to Fastbreak?
If there were, I can't remember Fastbreak getting any other offers. I think we had established that relationship with Revelation because Neil and I were now signed. And I actually think contractually we couldn't have gone anywhere unless Neil and I got released. Not that I think the contract or anything dictated where we ended up. We wanted to be on Revelation, and so going from Big Wheel, which was like a credible indie label in Boston, but didn't really have any bands that sounded like us, to Revelation was kind of a no-brainer. We're like, let's do our next record there, and that's ultimately where we ended up.
First Grimlock, we were on Pin Drop Records with Bill Cole, with Holdstrong and a few other bands and stuff, and we did a little 7-inch, Thirst for Immortality. Great fucking name too. So we were on that by releasing the 7-inch, but then we almost got signed by, I hate to say the name, I'm just going to call him Haji. There was a kid that I actually paid for Songs of Self, and he paid for a little bit of us to record that. But I don't know what the name of the label was, or it was just good intentions or bad intentions, but it turned out to be bad intentions because nothing ever came about that. And so Pin Drop kind of came back into the fold, and we put out that first album. And then after that first album, you know, it was kind of underground. There wasn't really much money and stuff. But then we got a call from Dan Gump, I think it was his name, because Matt knew him, and he wanted to sign it. He was a fan of our stuff, and he was starting a label and all that stuff, and he wanted to get us. And hey, we knew Pin Drop was kind of like, you know, small, but this was a little bigger, and it might have been, you know, more opportunity for us. So that's how we got onto Life Sentence and all that, because Dan was a big fan of ours, and then we got into that, and it took us to the next level. It's a straight edge label because I know Dan, I think, was straight edge. Now, I'm going to be very clear about this. I don't label myself anything other than a super duper hero. But what I never labeled myself straight edge or anything, because in the scene back then, that was kind of heavy. I've never drank, never smoked, never did a drug in my entire life. I've never drank coffee in my entire life. I haven't drank soda in maybe 30 years. I've always been the pinnacle of health, always. This explosive personality is all natural. But I never labeled myself because some of my other band members drank and some wanted to be straight, whatever. But I never labeled myself that, so it never mattered to me. I lived that healthy lifestyle, but I never cared about being that. So, and Dan was very open with that because back in those times, you know, it kind of mattered if you were or not. I never put myself in a box because I got an explosive personality, and nobody can box this motherfucker. Phil Example said he was the kid. No, I'm the fucking kid.
Any good, bad live show experiences?
I think for me the best Spain shows were always when we played somewhere new and it went really well, or when we got to travel. You know, I distinctly remember playing in Japan and like Australia and stuff where you're like so far from home and you know, literally on the other side of the planet, and you start to play that first note and kids go crazy and sing along, and it's not even in their first language, you know. So those kinds of shows and memories stick with me the most. You know, Bane played a lot of shows, so there isn't like one specific one, but you know, our first Japan tour was basically 2 weeks, and it was just incredible almost every single day. Japan is just such a beautiful country, and we were touring with a band called FC5, and those guys are lifelong friends because of that. So those are some of my personal best experiences for Bane shows. And we've also played, you know, we were lucky enough to tour a lot of places, and we went to Europe, and we went to awesome places in Europe, and we also played a show in Slovakia, and there was literally only one other person there besides the band. And then we ended up having to stay in this weird hostel that had like blood spattered all over the walls and stuff like that, and we thought we might not make it to the next day, but it all worked out in the end. So
we were playing a show in Dayton, Ohio, and basically like had a great show there. Like Dayton was like Worcester to us for some reason. Like, you know, we'd go there. It was like playing a hometown show. But this one time we ended up getting chased out of town by these like, you know, militant straight edge kids. Like it was like straight out of a movie. Like, but we ended up, you know, hauling away in the van while like some hillbilly was chasing us down. I think he busted our rear view mirror.
Was there a reason for that? Like they just didn't like that you guys weren't straight edge or something?
Well, they were gracious enough to let us stay at their apartment, and one of our roadie ended up, having a little too much to drink that night, and he threw up, like in the house. So I guess you can understand.
I just remember playing some amazing shows that were packed out, kids going crazy. But then I also remember getting, knocked unconscious by Mike D's headstock in front of like 15 people at a VFW in Connecticut, where I'm like on a pool of blood on the floor, just like, man, I'm up here literally killing myself for like 15 people, But that was part of the deal back then. That's one thing that's funny as far as shows. People see flyers from some of those early days and they're like, oh my God, all these bands in the same bill, and you're like, yeah, there was like 30 people there. It's funny because now, like, just how big just even metal and hardcore got in general compared to then locally was just so different, So yeah, I've had it all. We've had it all happen. We played literally storage spaces in Tyler, Texas, where it was just like they opened the rolling door of a storage space, and we just played inside, in like 110 degree heat. We've done it all.
I'd say one of the most interesting stories that we had was we were on tour with Diecast and Fragment, and something happened to one of their vans, and when we went to go pick it up, this was in Maryland, and when we went to go pick up the van, the people that worked there were like these rednecks, and for some reason they had a real issue with us, and broke out into just a big gang fight in the front parking lot. That was pretty crazy. And when the stadies came, they basically told us that anybody who threw a punch at all would probably end up in jail, so if anybody complained. So we all just kind of put our hands up and said, no, nothing happened here, and we all took off. So it was kind of nice, but it was pretty crazy for that day. One of the craziest experiences we had.
Playing shows at like Pearl Street was always a good venue. The place was loud. It was always crowded, and we always played with other bands that, were able to kind of bring in a decent crowd and make it feel welcoming. There's specific instances where you can remember people going crazy or not, just kind of standing around. We were in Chicago, and allegedly Tony from Victory Records was in the house, and we were playing, and one of the guitar amps just completely kept crapping out during the song, and I just like lost my mind, and just we completely stopped, like totally unprofessional, so to speak. We should have just probably ran with it, and it was kind of like a meltdown in front of everybody, and that didn't go so well. Fortunately, that didn't happen often.
We played a lot of shows. We played a lot of shows up and down the East Coast. We did a few tours. Some of the tours, tough to book a tour back then. No cell phones, no internet. So before you even started a tour, it would be $2,000, $3,000 in phone calls. And then you'd get to a show and you'd realize, the promoter didn't promote it. There's nobody here after you've driven 14 hours. Or the show would get canceled, and now you're hopping from one state, driving all the way through to the next state with no money. And at one point, I think we had 2 shows canceled back to back on this tour, and we had to drive from Colorado to Virginia Beach. And we were out with Grimlock, and Grimlock's like, we're flat broke. We can't do it. We're gonna head for home. So they headed for home, and their van's engine blew up halfway home. So I don't even remember how they got home. I think they ended up scraping some money together, rented another van with a trailer to put their van on, and I don't know how. And we went for broke. We said, well, we'll probably end up in Virginia with no money at all. So if this show isn't good, we might be living in Virginia for a little while. And the show ended up being incredible, one of the best ones on tour. The dude promoted it and just did a great job. He had some extra funding from like an anti-smoking partner. So we got paid well. The show was packed. People knew our songs, sang along. It was great. So we ended up, off of that show's money, we could make it to the next couple shows to get home.
Well, we were playing a festival in Chicago, So we packed all of our stuff, drove out there, got out there about maybe an hour or 2 hours before we were about to play. We were set to play. Got everything set up, got all of our equipment out of the vehicle. Went to go get ready for the band before us to finish, which I don't want to misquote the band, but it might have been the Gordon Sorley motherfuckers that were playing before us. And if you know anything about their shows, they get kind of crazy. There was a chandelier. Within a couple of minutes, there was a trash can hanging from the chandelier. There were fireworks going off, smoke everywhere, and then the show was shut down. And every band was told that they were no more show for the rest of the day. So we loaded all of our equipment back into the van and drove straight back to Massachusetts from Chicago. And to this day, I still have not had a pleasurable experience in the city of Chicago. But maybe that'll change one day. It's a beautiful city, I hear.
I mean, we did a lot of mini trips. Like we went to New Jersey, we went to upstate New York on this these crazy weekends, because some of the band members were working, others were in school, so it was difficult for us to do a full tour. But we did do this tour with Trial, and it was just a blast. These were my best friends, and we did these crazy drives every night. We would drive 8 hours. We drove from 8 hours from New Hampshire to Buffalo, New York. We built a loft in this parking lot for the van. It was freezing in Buffalo, and I just remember we were vegan, trying to find vegan food in the mid-90s in the middle of nowhere. It was so difficult. But just the fact that we were doing it together, even though it was hard, only one of us had a cell phone at that time, it was like going on vacation with my friends and then playing shows at night. So for me, it was like an experience that I go back to often. It ended abruptly and in a challenged way, but for me, the experience of being with these guys is something I think of often.
So, In My Eyes went to Europe once. We did a whole month with the Cro-Mags, which at that point in their evolution, it was the Harley Flanagan Cro-Mags. We, for cost reasons, split a bus with them. And so we're all on a bus together. We hadn't known them before we got on there. We're a bunch of straight edge kids. Harley was literally smoking blunts every night, but telling these amazing stories. So we would stay up every night with him, trying not to get secondhand high, but listen to his amazing stories. And we'd get to points where we're like, we gotta go to sleep, but the next story I bet is amazing. So it's just this weird thing where I was like, I would never be in the situation, but I am in Europe, of all places, driving around on a bus, listening to these amazing stories, trying to stick to my values. So it was a nice balance of trying to find the way to hang out and be there and not alienate somebody who's was having a good time hanging with us, but it was certainly very different from what I was doing in my typical life. Fastbreak had done a number of tours. Similar to my In My Eyes story, Fastbreak is a Europe story. So we were all 18 and 19, and we got dropped into Belgium, and we had about 2.5 days off before our first show. And the driver that picked us up, barely spoke English, handed us what seemed like a ton of money. It was like 500 or 600, whatever the Belgian currency was, because this is before the euro at that time. Handed us a bunch of money and put us in what was the club? It was like a back room that was almost set up like a hostel, and left us for 2.5 days. And we didn't speak the language of the country. Didn't give us a map. We had no vehicle, no nothing, and just said, there's a grocery store over there. Survive for 2.5 days. And we're a bunch of 19-year-old kids. And so we were just literally walking the town, trying to figure stuff out. Couldn't really speak to anybody, kept getting food and bringing it back. It was just a very surreal experience. Then to go from that into playing all these shows, we almost forgot where we were, why we were there, but just were this is pretty cool.
That's all we ever had was troubles. I mean, we had 11 guys, or maybe more, in the back of a Ryder van, going all across the country, no heat, no ventilation, that sometimes you stop in these neighborhoods and we stole a hammock, and then we had like an infestation that came from this hammock. We thought that was so cool to have the hammock, but it sucked because you kept shaking around and all that crap, but that's all there was problems, all that. But you got to look at it this way. That's trudging through. That's trudging through the scene, trudging to make it. That's all expected. It used to hurt other people more, but I kind of liked it because, you know, we were nothing, but it was still fun being out there and living life on your terms, you know, that you didn't have to answer to anybody, and it was kind of cool. So I remember one time I remember going on somebody's lawn, they had a sprinkler, and I remember I was just like, you know what, I can't take this anymore. I got to finally take a shower. It's probably been weeks, you know, you take those Italian showers and you clean yourself, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I got butt naked, I got all the soap, and I went right on their lawn, and I just started with their sprinkler. All of a sudden the cops come everywhere. They're like, what the hell are you doing? I was like, I'm sorry, I just had to take a shower. I just needed to take a shower. So that was a bad experience. I'll tell you one more. This is something, we were in Hardee's, I think down in Kansas City. And we were just in Hardee's because you know, you stop through and go into wherever you're going. And we're sitting there and we're, you know, opening up all ventilation, you smell like ass and all this stuff. All of a sudden, all these cars come, boop, 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 like these guys came out. Go, sit down, get down, get down. Guys in suits. We were like, what the hell? We didn't know. They told us all to get down. What it turned out being was they were scoping that area for drugs, for a long time, and they thought we were the drug dealers because we're counting this money. We have, like, they didn't know we have all this stuff packed up. We're in this van, all these weird-looking, ugly kids, all dirty and filthy, and all that shit. What are they doing? They put out a gun and all that, and I said, hey, listen, they were the FBI, and they said, you know, they were scoping us out, and I showed them what we were doing, because, you know, we had some money on us too. They thought we were counting drug money. So when they did that, and they just told us, they were so embarrassed. They said, just get your shit and get the fuck out of here right now. We were just going through, we packed up our stuff and we left. That was some scary shit. I remember playing at like Brandeis universities, but I kind of got a thrill when we played in front of nobody or nobody knew us, because I'm going to be honest with you, there's nobody that could take it to the level I did. Whether it was, I remember Level 40, what was the name of that band? There were, when Harry Krishner people started coming, you know, they started getting into the scene and all that shit. And I remember somebody from Shelter was in that band. I can't remember, but the worse the show, the more amped up I would get. And so what I would do is I would go bonkers, because I remember they were in this lounge area where they were waiting. You know, we played before them. And like I said, I can't remember the name of the band, but I remember going, motherfucker. And it's like I was playing in front of 1,000 people, playing in front of maybe 20. Like, and I jumped into that lounge area, I ripped the table that they were all sitting in, and I threw it into the crowd. Just chaos. I remember one with Jamie Josta. He had his little table there too, and I did a Jimmy Superfly snooker, and I ran across, and I snookered him. I went over his merch table, a flying body press, and I smashed into him. Everything went up and everything in arms. Beatty was there too, I think, and I said, let's go! So the less and worse the show was always better for me, because it amped me up. So I love that. Yeah, motherfucker.
all the time. I hate all the time. God help, I wanna kill. Help the hurt, the don't work. There'll be no mercy, I'll give you none. I'm gonna smack a bottle over your face. You're gonna lay there and bleed. Bitch! God help, yes then. Can't stop, getting worse than. No hope, nothing. Everything can end the rain. Some skin. Lord help. Touch my face. Make me weak. No. You fucking cunt. You ruined my life. I'm gonna kill you. I'm gonna kill you. You fucking cunt.
So Bane played its last show in June of 2016, and I think they broke up because they felt like they had sort of run their course and done what they wanted to do, and they didn't want to sort of fade and become a band that just sticks around too long. I think they sort of regretted it, especially towards the end. But I left the band in 2011, so I haven't been in the band for a while. I played bass basically from 1999 to 2011. I got offered a job, so I decided to leave. But I did do a couple other shows and a couple mini tours with them after that. But then they had a different bass, two or three other bass players in the span between me leaving and them breaking up, and they did a lot of stuff and put out a bunch of great records.
Yeah, the 98 tour was kind of the tour to destroy all bands. It was Overcast, Disembodied, Shai Hulud, and for a chunk, Shadows Fall actually opened before I was in the band, and this band Section 8 from Albany. And after the tour ended, Overcast broke up, Disembodied broke up, Section 8 broke up, Shadows Fall, I ended up, Phil left and I ended up joining, and Shai Hulud only had one member left after that. And honestly, Overcast, we'd been together since we were all like 15. And at that point, we'd all were either in college or graduated from college. So we just kind of, we'd played almost every weekend and done some touring till then. And I think people were just kind of burnt out. Jason and Scott kind of decided they didn't want to do it anymore. I knew we wouldn't sound the same without Jason on drums. To get a new drummer just didn't make sense. We'd all been high school friends and, grown up together. So it just didn't feel right to like get other dudes. So it just made sense to break up. But it's funny how, literally after that tour, all the bands that were on it just sort of imploded.
So the band started to change over time. Our original singer had to leave. He was in school and he just couldn't do the band anymore. He left, and it kind of changed the chemistry of the band a little bit. I left the band at that time too, similar reasons. I was just going to college and trying to do different things. And the band wanted to maintain pretty aggressive shows. So they kept going without us for a while. And then I ended up I got back into the band and played guitar for a few more shows. And then I just quit finally. And I'm not sure exactly how they broke up, to be honest, after that. But, I had been in and out a couple times at that point, so.
Member inconsistency, I think, is the main reason why we broke up. Matt Myrtle, who was a founding member, who played drums mostly, but played bass too, helped write a ton of the music. He was kind of feeling done with the band. Dan Reynolds, who was the other guitarist at the time, he was also kind of feeling like, geez, what are we doing? If a bigger label's not going to pick us up, we're kind of touring, and we're going to fork over all this money to record the next record. And they decided they were going to just get rid of all their stuff and move to Maui. So both of them packed a duffel bag worth of their CDs and their swimsuit, hopped a bus to California, flew to Maui, and just figured out how to live there for a while. So that kind of left the rest of us in the band like, well, now what? And we scraped together a couple other members who were, rad dudes, and we did write another record that a lot of people probably don't even know we put out, because we didn't play very much off of that record. We didn't tour off of it, which is too bad. I feel like it was our best record. I think that's probably, at that point, we just struggled to stay consistent with the members and not touring off of that record, and it was kind of frustrating, so we said, we just kind of called it quits.
We're not broken up. We still, well, I quit the band once. That came about because we were planning, we knew we had this show months in advance. And it's funny that I just mentioned the A-Team because this was their farewell show. And we knew a couple months in advance that we were playing the show. We didn't get a chance to practice before the show. And I had given them a heads up that I'm like, hey, if we don't get ample time to get ready for this show, I'm not going to go out there and embarrass myself. That's what it felt like I would do. Anyway, the practice day came the day before the show, and I just couldn't do it anymore. So as much as I regretted not being there and kind of bailing on the A-Team's last show, that's what I had to do. It wasn't really to make a statement, but it was just I couldn't go out there and give my best if I didn't have my best tools. So so that's officially how we kind of stopped playing.
I quit the Year of Our Lord in the year 2001, around the same time as drummer Glenn Brazel. I quit for personal reasons. I know the band continued on for another year or two with my brother Nick Kite and bassist Matt Lacasse. I do not know why they disbanded.
So, after the tour, Rob left the band, Kurt joined the band, and we played a few additional shows, but I think at that point our heart just wasn't in it. At that time the scene was changing a bit in terms of, we're seeing more violence at shows, and I wasn't, personally connecting with that, and I was finishing college, and it just felt like it was kind of done. Like we had, all sort of grown bored with it. And I just remember our last show, there was no official we're done or we're breaking up or anything like that, but I just remember after it, I didn't have the same feeling I did when we had been playing early on. It was just kind of getting through the show was the priority.
We just kind of ran our course. I think we had done a lot for a hardcore band. It almost seemed like a hardcore band at most did an EP and a full length. And then that was kind of what they did. And I think we kind of fell into that feeling of we did an EP, we did 2 full lengths, and we're playing a bunch of shows, and I think people started to get interested in being in other bands and doing different stuff. And rather than drag it out and maybe make it something that was painful, we said, let's just figure out when we're gonna do our last show. I think we did it on Edge Day, on or around Edge Day. I don't know if I'm making that up or not. Fastbreak had kind of hit a point like that too, where we had been a Connecticut band starting in high school, moved up to Boston. We had done a few full lengths. I think maybe we were feeling the second record we did, which we put everything into, wasn't being as received. So this is kind of that innate feeling of oh my God, we're going downhill and people aren't as into us or something. And also we felt like we had done a lot, at that point, and just decided, well, rather than drag this on, everyone's got other life interests in pursuing other things. Let's just go out with a bang and play some last shows and not drag it out and make it painful for anyone.
Okay, I'm going to be honest. See, Grimlock was, I was the nucleus of the band. It all kind of revolved around me. It was me and Matt and stuff, and it was our dream to start a band and all that. But you got to remember, okay, a lot of the problems with Grimlock, we had a lot of band members that came in and out and all that stuff. But see, I'm going to have to blame the most on me because I was never really a fan of hardcore music. I never really was. I liked heavy music. I loved the chaos. I loved the dance. I loved the groove, the power groove, and I love people killing themselves. I got off on that, but I never listened to the music. I never cared. I'm a Doors fan. Give me Doors, and that's it. And I can listen to that forever. And that's a big difference between hardcore and Doors. But so I kind of got tired of it, you know, because like I said, it wasn't my passion, and I felt sad because it was all the other guys' passion. And as our star kind of started rising a little bit, and I know we started making traction, and I just kind of lost interest. My goal was always to be in the comic industry, to be something in that, and that's what I kind of geared my life to, and why I'm successful today. But so it's kind of unfortunate. I love that the people, like the music, and you know, people, I get offers to go back in bands or sing on albums in bands or all that stuff, and make good money now too. But it was just never really my passion. So breaking up was because I actually was just trying to get to another level in my life, and Grimlock was another level in my life to go to the next level. So do I love it, and did I appreciate it and all that stuff? Yes, I do. And I still listen to Crusher, which I think is one of the best heavy albums of all. And I'll put that against any fucking hardcore album and all that. That still rocks, and that still has a great groove. And I still appreciate it. And there's still a few albums, little bits here and there, but I never got into such obsessed with this music. A lot of those other guys, they were all passionate of the music, where I didn't. I was never really a big fan of the hardcore stuff. So props to those guys.
Barrit broke up. We played our last show in Montreal, early 2000s. I was talking about Steve earlier. He actually ended up dying in a car accident a few years after the band sort of stopped. And we did do a reunion show with our original drummer and our singer that took his place, you know, to benefit his kids. And I think that will probably be the last Barrit show ever. The work involved in sort of making your band a touring band and becoming basically a full-time musician, you know, that sort of DIY ethic is sort of why I said hardcore described in one word is resourcefulness to me, because that sort of DIY ethic has shaped basically everything I've done since then. the businesses that I own and run now, and sort of the way that we pushed the band and moved forward, and you know, that sort of work ethic, I think, is sort of atypical of guys and people in their early 20s in order to get that stuff done. So learning that at an early age, and that you have to, you know, if you want something done, if you want to book a tour, if you want to do that, then you just do it, and you kind of jump, you know, both feet first right into it, and take the reins and learn as you go. Sort of has stuck with me the rest of my life. I'm married, and I have a 8-year-old named Wes, and he's learning to play drums. I do a lot of different jobs. I'm a marketing manager. I actually learned a lot of the graphic design that I do, basically building record albums for all the bands I was in. So I did a lot of the graphics for those things, and sort of turned into a career. I also am co-owner of Nova Motorcycles, based in Turners Falls, Massachusetts, where we are motorcycle specialists that basically we repair and restore and customize vintage motorcycles. And, you know, trying to just do all sorts of different businesses and, you know, make ends meet, basically.
Yeah, I'm married. Been married about 5 years. I got 3 kids. And I've worked at Bose for almost 20 years.
You know, I'd say hardcore and metal have had an impact on every part of my life, because honestly, for close to 20 years, it was my career, it was my income source, as well as, you know, something I love doing more than anything else. To be in a band for that long, and, you know, still be in bands now, you're never going to get rich playing this type of music or doing anything like that. You get out on tour and do it full time because you love it, you know, and it's definitely ingrained on everything. Even if I haven't listened to certain classic records in years, that stuff's imprinted on my DNA, you know. But it's funny, I find myself now, in heavy music especially, going back a lot more and listening to some of the earliest stuff, and just being blown away by how ahead of his time some of it still sounds, and how fresh it still sounds, and how the energy hasn't changed. And it's crazy to see some of these bands that are, you know, I recently saw Agnostic Front on their anniversary for Victim in Pain, and it's like, man, 35 years that record's been out, those dudes are just still killing it in their 50s, you know, Stigma and Roger, and it's just super inspiring. I saw the Cro-Mags open for Killswitch recently. So all those bands that I grew up in not only are still playing, they're still killing it, and it just shows you that it's a spirit, it's an energy, it's something that's inside of you that if it was real at the beginning, it's still there. Yeah, these days, got married about 8 years ago. I got 2 kids that definitely keep me busy. And still making music, jamming a band in the St. Louis area called Hell Night. I recorded a bunch of stuff with some Massachusetts dudes in a project called Downpour, that honestly we're supposed to get the vinyl and a bunch of other stuff out, but we were stuck up on that Pledge Music fiasco where they went kind of bankrupt and kept a bunch of people's money. So I've, you know, and we've talked about trying to do some Shadows Fall reunion shows right now, just kind of balance it around. You know, John's playing with Anthrax, Jason's playing with Overkill. They're a little busy. And then working for a guitar company for Alvarez Guitars. And just, you know, just chilling, doing the dad life, and hanging with the wife and the kids and the dog. And I still got to get up and scream at people every now and then. So I'll always be in a band in some way. Still skateboarding in my old age, not as much as I should, but probably more than I should at the same time. So try not to get hurt, and that's about it.
Getting into the hardcore scene when I did as a really young teenager, it really gave me a trajectory and a path to stay on. Especially being straight edge and having a good crew around me, and you know, it was like every weekend was about shows. It was all about music. I mean, all I thought about was music, and hardcore in general. Kind of, it didn't feel as much of a scene to me as it did a tribe, when I would go to other cities or other places and I saw other kids that looked like they were hardcore kids, we'd always get excited. We'd talk to them, and you know, it turns out we all like the same music and everything. So for me, it was more of a tribal factor. It gave me a place to be, and it really got me through some years that I don't know how else I would have got through them if I didn't have something so significant and positive. Yeah, so I'm married, happily married for over 10 years now. Got 3 kids. One of them's an adult today. He's off on his own life now. I got two younger ones that are still coming up. So being a dad's a big part of my life. It's been a major factor in my life. For my job, I work at a cable access station, and I really consider what I do there as being government transparency. We just pretty much record every government meeting that happens and play them back for people, so they can understand the workings of their town. And, you know, as far as still doing music, I play acoustically quite often. And I have all sorts of little projects I work on. I've scored a couple short films. I do some joke stuff. I have a funny rap band called Grilled Cheese that I work on. So, you know, I'm still pretty active in music. I don't do as much of it in front of people anymore, but I definitely still write, and it's still a big part of my life.
I'm the Deputy Chief Technology Officer for the state of Massachusetts. I've wife of 19 years, 2 kids. I don't play any music at all. I still have all my gear. You know, I finally got all the gear that I really wanted after all those years of playing. You know, my Mesa Bookie dual rectifier head and the guitar that I wanted, and it just sits collecting dust. Occasionally my kids are like, oh, pull it out, you know, we want to see you play guitar or whatever. And I've pulled it out a few times and kind of put on like an old Holdstrong record or the last Velocity Engine CD that we recorded. I can't play it. My hands are so slow. I don't even remember half the riffs that like I made up, and I can't even play it, so I don't do much. I've been just riding my bike a ton. I got back into riding BMX at skate parks. My kids are into it. I started racing mountain bikes and in enduro races, you know, downhill mountain biking, and doing that with my kids too. Well, that's kind of taking up all my time.
I'm a high school teacher. I teach high school history. I've been teaching for 20 years. I'm married for 20 years now. I got 2 girls. One's in college, the other is a junior in high school. So just doing, you know, the dad thing. Still listening to music. You know, heavy metal music mostly, kind of going back to some of the roots, so to speak. Haven't really gotten into too much newer stuff, but I always kind of dig out some of the older things from the collection.
How has hardcore affected my life today? You know, I still carry that same mindset of the things that that kind of drew me to it to begin with. So I still have that rebellious edge, and I still am a very independent person, and I'm looking to be as free as possible, in not only in my life but just in this country. Musically, I do not really listen to anything hardcore, but I think just that mindset is always going to be there. Kind of like, you know, skateboarding too. You know, I don't get out there and skate every day, but I do see things that I'm like, that just catch my eye. I'm like, that's skateable. I'd skate that, you know. I don't think those things are ever gonna die, you know, especially hopefully when I'm like 70, 80 years old, looking at things, knowing that I can't get out of this wheelchair, but I'm like, maybe I can shred that in my wheelchair. I think I carry that same mindset about hardcore. You know, there's always, even though it didn't quite pan out the way that I thought a hardcore fantasy should, I still have those fond memories, and I still think back of, you know, try to apply those things that I learned from any legends or any just peers, and just try to apply those good things to life. I'm not still playing music, and I'm not married, but I am in a very happy relationship with my partner, Gail, who is around here somewhere, and mostly just living a happy life with Gail and my dog here, Miles. who's taking a nap. I kind of found some passion in the animal field, working with dogs. I went to school, got a training certificate, so I'm a certified trainer. I work with dogs in a daycare capacity, mostly not looking to do training, but really highly focused on dogs and their behavior and why they do what they do, and just trying to help them have happier lives. This guy had a little rough going, and you know, every day is a different process with him, and he's getting better every day. I mean, he let you in the house no problem, so that was a big step. And you know, it was just trying to make sure that everything is happy and safe in his life. And I try to apply that to the work that I do in doggy daycare settings, because sometimes dogs go to daycare and that's not what they want, you know. So I try to set up a daycare of dogs that actually want to be there. And if they go through any rough spots or whatever, I try to help them work their ways through it. And it's a very fulfilling job for me.
Hardcore made me feel empowered, and that goes to the DIY ethic that, you know, started with punk rock and continued to hardcore. So basically, hardcore makes you empowered to kind of feel like you can do anything. You can start a band even if you're not the best guitarist or bassist. You can make, you know, book shows and play in front of people. You can start a zine. You can, you know, do your own graphic design for flyers or album covers. Write your own music. Book your own tours. Travel the country. These are all kind of big things that hardcore made you feel empowered that you could do, that were reachable. Yeah, I'm kind of a business dad. I work for an audio company. I'm a product manager. I'm a father of 2 girls, and I spend a lot of time as a dad. I do still record music in my home studio, but I have nothing where I'm playing out right now.
Yeah, I often say, I say to friends now that, you know, hardcore saved my life. Like, I was really, and I don't say that lightly. At the time when I first discovered hardcore, you know, I felt a lack of hope for my life. I felt no sense of self-worth. And the people I met in the hardcore scene and their optimism and their just like their passion for, you know, life, including, you know, their passion for protesting social injustice, that gave me a mission and a purpose. And so I think about where my life would be if I hadn't discovered hardcore. So I still draw on that all of the time. The you know, do-it-yourself ethic is part of everything I do. You know, speaking out, the sort of the youthful energy that I got from hardcore is 100% part of who I am today, even still. I'm married. I have 2 kids, an 8-year-old and 4-year-old daughter. I still listen to punk and hardcore, occasionally go to shows. Like, being a parent of 2 young kids, it's difficult to get out a lot, but I definitely go to shows. I still have some of my best friends or people I met in the scene years ago. You know, professionally, I'm a program director for a Peace and Dialogue Center in Cambridge, and I've been practicing Buddhism for about 20 years, and so that is kind of like things that keep me energized and focused, and that I'm passionate about. But for me, I totally see a relation between that and my, you know, my focus and interest in punk rock.
I think hardcore has given me a license to be proud and have confidence in what I want to do, even if it's completely different from how anyone has ever done it in the past. I think there's a lot of things in life where you're either told you have to do it a certain way, or you're watching other people doing it and you may not feel like you have the license to do it differently. But actually, any great or innovative thing that has bucked or disrupted a system was because somebody said, I'm just going to do it differently. And I really feel like I sharpened my teeth in the hardcore scene and playing hardcore music by just saying, we're going to do stuff in a different way. And still to this day, when I'm making decisions, whether it's for this business or for my house or for, you know, the music I'm still playing, I always remind myself, sure, look at influences, but don't hesitate to just do something different. Yeah, so let's see, I just passed the 40 mark last year, and now I run this content studio that you're in now for an agency called GYK Antler. I live in Western Mass in a town called Ludlow. I have a wife of over 10 years, a kid who's going to be 9 in a few weeks. And we live on a small farm, so I still have a very kind of sustainable lifestyle. I grow a lot of my own food. And that keeps me busy between being here, creating content, being on my farm, creating vegetables, and then still doing music. So piebald is still a very active thing. We're actually getting ready for some Christmas shows and a tour with Dashboard Confessional next year. So never a dull moment in my life.
Well, hardcore, not the music so much. I still listen to like I said, a few songs, but it was working hard to make of something of yourself. I know how hard these bands worked, because when we used to tour, you go out there and then you hook up with another band that might have been out there for a year, and they're, you know, they got bare feet and all that stuff, and they're just playing the music because they love it. But that's what hardcore has done for me. It taught me to work hard for something, to be something of myself, and that's what got me into this business. Listen, I'm not, in 5 years, I'm probably the biggest agent in the comic industry ever. Hard work, know-how, honesty. That's the stuff that hardcore kind of brought out. Be honest. I was always real up there on stage. I almost died. That's why I could do it better than anybody else, and that's the goddamn truth. Because I didn't play by proposing. I played with my heart and my fucking, or an erection that was so hard, and it was lived. That's hardcore for me, and that's what it did for me. That's what it done. Boom! I do have my daughter, Bryn Isabella Semino, who happened to become, because of my connections and stuff, she's very talented and all that, she became the youngest artist to be printed and paid for in the history of comic books. She became that, so with that, I live vicariously through her. I live this dream life of just comic books and travel and all that stuff, so I think it's a good inspiration. So basically my life right now is living life on my terms. What I tried to do with Grimlock, or with the horror, basically what we all try to do in the punk scene and stuff, you live life on your terms and saying, and not having to answer to anybody. That's what I do now, but in the industry that I love. But it's also inspiring to my daughter, and that's what I love more than everything, that she can look to me and she can see that your dreams are out there. Hey, it pays interest when I take her to these parties and all these celebrities are all there and all that stuff, and it's kind of like, yeah, these are the people I hang with, you know? I mean, not that I give a crap, but it's like, you know, it's good to be in their company, you know? And it's a good inspiration for her. Hard work makes it. I've never been given everything, just like the music and just like all these other bands that come from the hardcore scene. I give them 100% props, because we all come from nothing. We're just trying to live this dream and trying to say our piece. I'm just doing it in another avenue and all that stuff. Let me throw this out here for my acclaim. I got Roy and Stan together literally less than 48 hours before he died. Stan didn't want to see anybody, but he wanted to see me and Roy. So we went to go visit him. We sat down with him for a half hour. Now think about this, the God of gods, and I'm sitting there as a young kid and saying, holy moly. And what it turned out with, let me show you this right here. It'll make you, oh, it's actually right here. Right here, that's show that nice and close. That's the last photo ever taken of Stan Lee right before he died. Me, Roy, and Stan. And I'll show you something. If you look closely, look at the shirt I got on. I got a Grimlock shirt on. The reason why I did that was because that was a big thing in my past life, and I knew I was coming to see Stan, and I kind of wanted everything that took me to get to that moment, and that was one of the things for Stan, and so I actually put that in there. And I remember I get written to by a lot of fans and all that, and they would be like, I can't believe that picture is like a Grimlock shirt. Grimlock is in there with the last photo ever of Stan Lee. So this was less than 48 hours before he died. The last photo he ever took, me, Roy, and Stan Lee hanging it out and just having a good time, and two old friends, and just so you know, see how I'm in the middle there? Stan told me to sit in the middle right there. So that was awesome. I'm gonna get a little teary-eyed, because that just shows you how far I reached for my dreams, and it did start with Grimlock. And one more thing, and if you look closely, there's a little bow, and there's a little bow, it's different. I always wear bows here, and they were my daughter's when she was a little kid, and what I ended up doing is I included that there too, so my daughter could be with me. And I took that to Paris, that bow to Paris just a few weeks ago, and I threw it into Jim Morrison's grave. So Stan Lee, my daughter, Jim Morrison, Grimlock, all combined into one, right there. So that's what Grimlock has led me to. Living your dreams, baby.
It all starts the soul. Manipulating bodies force their guilt upon the weight